The grand lobby of the Starlight Residences was a canyon of marble and silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic ticking of the clock behind the front desk. Oliver sat in his chair, his back straight despite the lingering ache in his shoulder, a souvenir from a collapsed roof 10 years ago. Before he was a night security guard, Oliver had been a captain in the fire department. He had spent half his life walking into buildings that everyone else was running out of. His body had retired, but his instincts were still tuned to the frequency of trouble. To the residents, Oliver was the quiet man who polished his boots every night and always had a spare umbrella for a rainy day. But Oliver didn't just watch the monitors, he read them. He knew the gait of every resident, the way they jingled their keys, and the exact time they usually returned home. He noticed the micro-expressions on their faces, the exhaustion of a nurse finishing a double shift, the excitement of a young couple moving in, and the subtle, creeping shadows of fear. For the past month, Oliver's internal alarm had been silent, until Maya. Maya was a freelance illustrator who lived on the 10th floor. She was the kind of person who brought Oliver a box of cookies during holidays and always had a bright, good evening to share. But lately, the light in her eyes had been replaced by a hollow, haunted look. She had stopped visiting the lobby mailroom. When she did leave the building, she was always flanked by a man named Elias. Elias was a man of cold smiles and expensive watches. He introduced himself as her cousin, but Oliver's eyes, trained to spot structural weaknesses, saw the fractures in that story. He noticed the way Elias always positioned himself between Maya and the exit. He saw how Elias's hand stayed firmly on the small of her back, not as a gesture of affection, but as a leash. He watched through the graininess of the security footage as Maya looked up at the cameras, her eyes lingering just a second too long, as if she were trying to send a signal through the lens. One Tuesday night, the elevator doors opened, and Maya stepped out with Elias. Her face was pale, and she wore a long-sleeved turtleneck despite the summer heat. As they passed the desk, Maya stumbled slightly. For a brief second, the sleeve of her shirt pulled back, revealing the dark, unmistakable shadow of a grip mark on her forearm. Oliver's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at Maya, and in that split second, she didn't look away. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were screaming. Elias pulled her closer, his voice a low, threatening murmur, and they disappeared into the night. Oliver knew he couldn't just call the police without proof. Elias was charming and manipulative, and Maya was clearly too terrified to speak. He had to create an opportunity for her to be alone, a way to break the perimeter Elias had built around her. He spent the next few hours studying the building's blueprints. He wasn't looking for a way in. He was looking for a way to force them out. He knew the building's systems like he knew the controls of a fire engine. He knew that even a small disruption could trigger a massive reaction. The following evening, at exactly 8 p.m., Oliver initiated his plan. He didn't pull the main fire alarm. That would bring the trucks and cause a panic he couldn't control. Instead, he used the building's maintenance override to trigger a localized smoke sensor malfunction, specifically on the 10th floor. He also killed the power to the hallway lights, leaving only the pulsing red emergency strobes to cut through the darkness. The alarms in the hallway began to blare. It was a loud, piercing sound designed to disorient and demand action. Oliver grabbed his heavy flashlight and his master key, limping slightly as he made his way to the elevator. When he reached the 10th floor, the hallway was empty, but the alarm was screaming. He stood in front of apartment 1004 and pounded on the door. Fire department. Emergency evacuation. Everyone out of the building immediately. Oliver shouted, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who had commanded fire scenes for decades. The door opened a crack. Elias peered out, his face twisted in annoyance and a hint of genuine panic. What's going on? There's no smoke. Electrical fire in the crawl space. Oliver barked, not giving him a second to think. He shined his high-intensity flashlight directly into Elias's eyes, blinding him for a crucial moment. The fumes are toxic and invisible. We're clearing the floor before the ventilation shuts down. Move now. or I'll have to report you to the marshal for obstructing an emergency rescue. I need to inspect every room." Elias hesitated. He hated losing control, but he hated the thought of authority figures entering his space even more. He stepped back to grab his jacket, his hand finally letting go of Maya's arm. In that 5-second window, Oliver stepped into the doorway and caught Maya's hand. "Go to the stairs," Oliver whispered, his voice as sharp and steady as a blade. "Do not take the elevator. My car is in the basement, spot 102. The keys are under the sun visor. My daughter, the police sergeant, is there. She's waiting. Go." Maya looked at him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. For a heartbeat, fear held her frozen. Then, she saw the steady, unmoving strength in the old firefighter's eyes, a man who had spent his life saving people from burning ruins. She turned and bolted for the stairwell, her footsteps echoing down the concrete flight. A moment later, Elias reappeared at the door, looking for Maya. "Where is she?" Oliver stood in the doorway, blocking the path with his broad shoulders. He turned off his flashlight and looked Elias dead in the eye. The alarm continued to scream, the red light flashing rhythmically, but Oliver's voice was unnervingly calm. "She's gone, Elias. And she's never coming back." Elias lunged forward, his face contorted in rage, but Oliver didn't move. He simply held up his phone, which was connected to the building's internal speaker system. "I've been recording the audio for the last 5 minutes. And the cameras in the hallway just caught you trying to drag her back inside. I've already sent the feed to my old colleagues at the precinct. They're about 3 minutes away. In my world, we don't just put out fires, we remove the fuel." The bravado drained from Elias's face. He looked at the darkened hallway, then at the stairs, and finally at the man who stood like a stone wall in front of him. He realized that he wasn't dealing with a simple security guard. He was dealing with a captain. Elias turned and fled in the opposite direction, trying to use the back service exit, but Oliver had already remotely locked that door through the security console. By the time the police arrived, Elias was trapped in a dead-end corridor, and Maya was miles away, safe in the home of Oliver's daughter, finally beginning the long process of reclaiming her life. Months later, a small plant was left at the front desk with a card. It wasn't signed, but the drawing on the card was of a lighthouse standing firm against a stormy sea. Oliver placed the plant next to his monitor. He still polished his boots every night, and he still watched the cameras. But now, when he looked at the 10th floor, the light he saw in the hallway felt just a little bit brighter. He knew that while he couldn't save everyone from every fire, for one person, he had been the lighthouse they needed.